Okay, hello. Hopefully this video is going to be a kind of combination of Python and SQL. Mostly SQL, because it's all good. But a little bit Python. So basically this is going to be how we interact between Python and SQL Server. So we obviously know that from 2017 onwards, SQL Server now allows us to have kind of Python and R called directly from SQL Server. So this is kind of how we interact with it a bit more. So I've done a couple of videos already about kind of how you interact by just pushing data back and forth. But this one is a little more kind of just directly interactive between the stored proc call out to Python and SQL Server itself. So you can see how we can kind of run it, get values back, get data sets back, pass data sets in, that type of thing. So it's not necessarily going to be kind of using Python. This is the interaction between the two. You'll see what I mean. So I'm going to presume that you've got SQL Server set up to allow machine learning, so everything's turned on and running and happy. And then all we're going to do, like I said, is just do some kind of very basic interactions. So let's start just with the call itself. I hate writing this, it's far too long. Internal script. Okay, so first thing we need to do is basically just say what language we're using. You're going to have to forgive my typing. I probably should have done all this first, but sometimes it seems fun to type on the fly. Script, and then to actually put our script in, everything has to be nvarchar, so you need the n in front of all of the script notation. So every time you do a single quote, you need the n. Otherwise it won't allow it. In fact, I'll show you the error. So I'm just going to do a print hello. Now obviously you can use the single quote which Python accepts, but obviously that kind of breaks SQL. You have to escape it. I therefore just find it easier to use the double quotes inside the Python scripts. So if I now try and run this, like I said, this is going to error because it only accepts nvarchar. So if I try and run this, what you'll get is, there you go, script must be type nvarchar. So you slap an n in front of it, go just for that, and that should therefore work. Now I don't know why it does this, but the first time you kind of invoke Python, it seems a little slow. So you can see that was like 6 seconds, but from now on, it's just very, very quick. So it's almost like it kind of loads it up in the background. I'm not actually sure how that bit works, to be honest, but that's my presumption, is it's loading it up, and from that point on, it works just fine. So you can see we've now got the output, hello. So that's kind of the most basic SQL Server interacting with Python. Print hello. Now, normally you would want to do something a little more fun, so I don't know, get like results or something out of your Python script kind of into SQL Server. So you might be kind of running a script, calling out to Python, getting something back, and then carrying on running your script. So you kind of want a variable back out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a very simple bit of code. So you can see we're going to allocate the variable thing to 2 + 1. So Python is just going to create thing valued at 3. And I'm then just going to print that out. So if I just do print thing. Now we know that that's therefore going to give us in our screen here, we're just going to get a massive error. What have I done? Oh, indentation. Be very, very careful with the indentation, because obviously Python scripts themselves rely on indentation in order to actually know which part of the script it's in. So whether something's part of an if block or a function or a loop, the indentation is critical, because you don't have, like in SQL, you have a begin and an end, and whatever's in the middle is part of that if or while or whatever. In Python it doesn't work like that. In Python you specify the if, then you indent, and you just keep going on that indent, and as long as there's an indent, that is part of the if. The moment you bring that back, you've ended the if loop. So indentation is actually a critical part of the Python language, and obviously Management Studio doesn't realize it's writing Python. So obviously when you then press enter, it defaults to the same kind of indentation as the line above, which therefore causes problems in Python. So just as a reminder, don't let it do that. Sometimes it's easier just to pull them back in a bit, just so that you don't have this kind of thing happening. But anyway, you can now see what it's done, and we've got 3. So what I actually want is to actually get that out. I mean, you can see this is in the messages window. The messages window isn't useful to us, so we want to kind of get this out. So what I'm going to do is I am going to declare my result as an int, because I know it's going to be an integer. And then what you actually do is you basically say to this that we're going to have a parameter, and it's going to be thing and it's an int, and it's going to output. Okay, and then what we basically do here is we say thing is going to go to our result. And if we run that, well, actually we don't want to run just that, we want to actually select result, otherwise there's no real point. There we go. If you run that, you can now see that what we've done is we've allocated this to an output variable, and we've told it make that output variable into the one we want to kind of come out of the proc. So it outputs it out to our result, we can then select it. So now you can actually see that we've got the value back out into kind of the real world. We can now do stuff with this, we can use it, so we could do kind of, you know, select result +1 and we will get 4. So we can now use it in the kind of T-SQL world. So that's how you get kind of individual items out. Obviously we don't just want to take certain stuff out, we want to put certain stuff in. So I'm going to put a table in, then I'll try and get a table out. So I'll kind of flick in between the inputs and the outputs, but for the moment I'm just going to try and get a table in. So we've kind of done nothing at the moment, we're just coding Python and expecting stuff out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass a table in. So I am going to kind of cut this bit out here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print input data set. Now input data set is how the Python within SQL knows that something has been passed in. This is kind of like a keyword, I suppose, in a way. So basically this is where the data arrives into the Python script from SQL. So we need to kind of pass that in. So we're going to say input data 1 is going to equal, and I'm just going to do select name from sys.databases. So as part of our script, there you go, just a list of databases. You can see most of them on the side here anyway. So that's just a list of databases. We're going to pass that in, and that is just going to become our input data set. Okay, and we can just print that out. Now Python will actually turn it into a data frame. So there you go, you can see if we print that, we get our data frame. You can tell it's a data frame because it's got the added index column starting at 0, which is kind of what data frames do. They add this kind of, by default, they add the index column on the front to kind of uniquely identify the records. So you can see this is actually a data frame, and that's all it takes. We just do input data, we put our query, and we can access it using input data set. So that kind of puts data frames into our Python that we can then start doing stuff with, which I'm not going to really do now, but you know, well, okay, let's kind of do the odd little thing. So what we could do here is we could, for example, we could say dot location input data set from our name column equals testdb, and then close square bracket. There we go, that should work. So if I now run that, you can see we now get just the record which matches testdb. So we can basically use it like a data frame. So you can see that is a pure data frame. We can query it, we can do whatever we like with it. So now we've put our data in, we can do what we like with that data that's in. World is good. Now, what if we want to get this data out? That's obviously slightly different, but actually not too hard at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the print statement. So effectively now what I've got is just my subset of data in its own data frame. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to output data set. So we've got an input data set and an output data set. I'm going to set our output data set to be this data frame, i.e. basically this down here. So if I do that, what I can now actually do is I can just run this. There you go, and we actually get an output data set, which is a table in SQL world. So effectively, when we do the input, SQL takes a table, puts it in, and it ends up as a data frame. When we output it, we get a data frame, and then we basically output it, which becomes a table in SQL world. So this is kind of just our easy way of interacting with the Python script. Now obviously you might want to capture this, and as you can actually see here, we don't need that anymore. We've just got it coming into our management studio. We're not actually capturing this. So if you want to capture this, let's just do drop table if exists temp table, create table temp, and I just want database name varchar 100 will do fine. And then all you've got to do is insert into that the proc, and once you've done that, select start from temp, and we now have a temp table containing our data. Okay, so you can now go on and start using this and doing funky stuff with it, etc. You can now use it within your T-SQL. So that's all good. Now, one thing you might want to do, and this is a little bit irritating. So basically, if you want to have, I don't know, let's see if we've got a, let's create a little procedure. Procedure if exists temp proc. Create procedure temp proc as go, and we're just going to say select star from, actually I'm just going to do select name from sys.databases where name like test. Okay, so if we now were to run this, okay, so we've now got a subset of data. Now let's imagine we've got a stored proc that's doing some really complex logic, multi-statement, etc., but it just returns a data set, and that's the data set that we want to put into our Python script. Now, this you would think is not a problem, because surely we can just, let's clean this up a bit, pass this into our Python script, but actually we can't. You'll get an error, and basically it says only select statement is supported. So we can't actually put a proc into here, it has to be a select statement. Now, as I said, this might be a really complicated multi-statement, massive logic, several thousand row thing, so not ideal. But again, why don't we just use the similar kind of temp table we had before? So drop table if exists temp, create table temp, and then we just create something that can actually hold the results of our stored proc. So we know that our stored proc, if I just run this, just returns some database. So I'm just going to say, okay, database name, varchar 100, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to say insert into temp exec our proc, temp proc, and then what we can do, because now we've put, there we go, we've now put our 3 records into our temp table. What we can now do here is just do select star from temp, and then that should work just fine. What did I do wrong? Name, because I foolishly changed the name here. That should just be name. So let's rerun that. There we go. And now if we pass this in, the world is good. It was because I was referencing the column name inside my Python script, and stupidly I renamed this as database name. They obviously have to match for it to work. If I was to change this to database name, then I would have to change that to database name, and if I was to run that, this will work just fine. Okay. So you can see how kind of easy it is to do the kind of interaction between our Python scripts and SQL Server. So effectively you could kind of have this as part of an ETL, and I'll kind of show you a little bit in an upcoming video where I'm going to try and do kind of, well, I'm not going to do proper machine learning, I'm just going to do a very, very basic bit of machine learning where we can just get a Python script to just determine what something is based on the data it's passed by SQL Server. And the idea is you could have something like that in an ETL. So as part of your ETL, you could have data going into Python, allow Python with its machine learning and other kind of algorithms to determine whether the data is known, not known, good, bad, etc. It can then output it. You capture the output by putting this into a table, and then you can carry on with your ETL based on Python kind of giving you, I suppose, part of your transform layer. And yeah, but this is all the kind of fundamentals of it. I said it was how to kind of just get a variable back, how to get full data sets back, how to pass data sets in. And yeah, so have a play and see if it makes sense. I'm going to put all of this, including the full script, not just my kind of butchered, because I've edited this as I've gone, but I'll put the full script out on my blog on qtech.co.uk. So I'll make a full blog with all of this listed out, so if you want to go there you can go and get it. Like I say, qtech.co.uk. We've got loads of other blogs and stuff on there, and yeah, hopefully, like I said, this will be useful. Practice, play with it. Hopefully it'll be a precursor to the next video whenever I get around to making that one, and all good. So subscribe, like, whatever, and I will see you next time.